You're listening to Healing That Sticks, Changing the Paradigm Around Health and Healing. I'm Amina Mir, a medical intuitive and an energy healer. And with me is my partner, Chuck Crook, a therapist and a life force attunement practitioner. At this moment, when medical practices are both politicized and emotionally fraught, we think energy medicine is the cure. So today we're talking about energy medicine and the brain and using it as a tool to address brain malfunctions, brain imbalances, and we're talking about. We shared a client who is who's dealing with bipolar, but we have had multiple clients dealing with brain imbalances. And I was wondering, and Chuck is also a therapist, so also trained in that modality and talk therapy as well. And I was wondering what his thoughts were about actually changing brain imbalances without necessarily requiring medical intervention or not medical intervention, let's say chemical drug intervention.
Yeah, my feeling is that yes, these, whether it's bipolar or borderline, schizophrenia is a little bit more intense in terms of what we're dealing with. But all of these are energy patterns that were set up in most cases in childhood, at a young age, at some point in growing up, and traumatic experiences probably triggered a lot of that. And so those traumatic experiences that jarred your psyche and caused you to have trauma that you were overwhelmed by, and those emotions were too big to feel when you were young because you didn't have, your brain was still developing. And so those energetic patterns are trapped emotions, are repressed emotions. And in the energy healing work that we do, those energy patterns, those trapped emotions, they kind of are the tectonic plates of your identity. So they're very foundational. So those plates are not going to be shifted around, willy-nilly and easily. It's going to take a lot of work and processing over time. Those plates can shift, and your feet can be on the ground. You can be fully grounded in yourself, free of those old patterns. But the release of those patterns is, I think for my PTSD, it took me like 20 years. But I wasn't in PTSD every day, but it took a long time for me to have sort of a spiritual practice, a process. For me, it was meditation, yoga, where when my brain did get sort of trapped back in those old patterns, triggered, I was able to recenter. I was able to find my way back home to self, to that homeostatic balance where my brain was making, less fight or flight chemicals and making more nurturing. Well, the brain, is going to be all over the place because our lives are all over the place. Right. But there's like a baseline of self, right? Of a stable self, of a grounded self. And I knew on a day-to-day basis where I was in that. And did I let it go too long? Was I, out of my body and overthinking and dissociated for, too many days in a row? And if I was, well, then I'm going to need more work to get back, right? If you're out of shape, you got to go to the gym or you got to do more yoga or whatever. You're not just going to be good after one session. So the brain is like that energy pattern, that your baseline, that we can help you get to where you may not need the medicine, the chemicals, the pharmaceuticals anymore, but you are, you're your own railroad conductor, right? Your life is going down this track, and you're the one that knows if you're going too fast or if you're just right on a daily basis.
You and I were also talking about the way in which energy healing works and the way in which it can be subtle, so that it's not one and done with anything. So it's not one and done. You take a pill and your whatever you have, your schizophrenia, your bipolar, your headache, your stress level, or whatever is resolved, is just resolved temporarily, or you continue taking the medication, or it's not like you have a surgery and your issues resolved immediately. You have to recover from this surgery. There are side effects or all these different things. And similarly with energy medicine, that it works in a very subtle way, but it doesn't, like, I know both of us have had the experience of having a client who has in that session a complete elimination of their symptoms that they're dealing with. And then maybe an hour later, maybe the next day, all those symptoms come rushing back in. And my argument with that, or what my argument, my conversation with my people about that, is that it's consecutive work, that nothing happens. It's not a single incident that happens that totally that can bring you back completely into balance. That it's that repetitive work and that repetitive moving of that energy, that very subtle movement of that energy that brings you more and more into balance.
Absolutely. It is subtle, but it's also extremely, like you say, you can have a catharsis in one session and be completely out of that old pattern and be in a space of like where you're recognizing, who you really are, free of that pattern. And it's like, it's an epiphany. It's like, wow, I want this. This feels so good. This is who I really am. How do I maintain this level of freedom, of joy, of, excitement about myself, not being sort of thrown off by life's experiences. Like I can be stable and I don't have to worry the next shoe's going to drop or whatever.
I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like when one experiences that without the use of any chemical thing, that, a drug or a medicine or something that causes that, when one finds that balance in the brain, how long one's able to continue that. Like, I feel like, and I have yet to completely understand this, and maybe you do more, that if one works enough through releasing those trapped emotions, through releasing those old traumas, through kind of getting through all of those belief systems and whatever, that one can change, because all of the chemicals in our body that go out of balance, our body knows how to make them and put them back into balance, so that if we get to a place where we can release all of this, that eventually the body will create all the chemicals that the brain needs, and the brain won't need a pharmaceutical intervention or a plant medicine or another thing that might be sufficient.
That's the most amazing thing if you just stop and think about it. The body is and the brain are such a miracle. They're miracle machines. It's like, how is it that the body can know exactly and the brain can know exactly what it needs to heal itself? But it does. It's just built that way. And what we're really doing in a way is just removing it's like, what is in the way of that. And part of what's in the way of that, we keep coming back to just about every one of these podcasts. We have to come back to trapped emotion. Right. Because that's what's at the basis that is programming the brain to make certain chemicals, too much cortisol or whatever it may be, not enough serotonin, whatever imbalances in your brain that are existing, there's a script for that in those trapped emotions that is counterproductive for you and your balanced brain. And the miracle of the energy work is, I'm just sitting there being a conduit, you're there being a conduit, and we're just watching consciousness, a higher state of your own consciousness, you as your higher self, basically take that script and correct it where it's off. And we couldn't tell you the gestalt of that could involve an organ, beyond the brain. It could involve the heart. It could involve the lungs. It could involve the stomach. It could involve all the above. We have no idea what chemical combinations need to be created in that session for you to release that trapped emotional pattern. But your higher self knows the script, the prescription, and it brings it and it does it. And you're sitting there and you're like, oh, those knots in my stomach are gone. And once those knots in my stomach are gone, that tightness in my gut is gone. Wow, the breath is getting down into my pelvis, and my pelvic floor is solid now, and I'm in my body in a different way. Whoops. And now look, my throat cleared, and now the oxygen's getting up to my brain, and everything's working in perfect synchronicity. And that's how you, and you get to observe that. Like, okay, maybe not the very first session, but if we stick with this work after a few sessions, you're going to be witnessing, you're going to actually be feeling that along with us as we're doing the work.
Yeah, it was interesting because I've done some sessions with people who have a couple of sessions with, actually not a couple, like quite a lot of sessions with a woman who has dissociative identity disorder. And she is able to, now that we've been doing it for a while, after a session, to have all her, what does she call them, her alters, go quiet, so that she's able to feel like she's just back into one person in the world, doing the things that she wants to do and being present to the things that she wants to be present to, which has been really powerful. And I wonder how much work that, whether that's possible to make that a permanent shift, or whether it's making it less and less and less over time so that it eventually becomes permanent, or whether, like all of us, I guess, like we all have the parts in our bodies that are weak, so that when we are faced with difficult situations or stressful situations, they pop back in again.
Right. Permanent is permanently processing, right? We're permanently processing is what we're doing. I mean, like I meditate every day. I've meditated every day for over 30 years. And some meditations are hard work. And some meditations are a complete ease of being situation where I'm just in a blissful state and I'm enjoying that. But either way, I'm getting what I need based on life's, slings and arrows that are thrown at me. And those tectonic plates of your identity that are the foundation of these mental experiences that we call bipolar, that we call schizophrenia, that we call dissociative identity disorder. I think they're more alike than they're different. I think we're all more alike. I think we all have those, maybe not to the same degree. But like, I know that when I started doing this work, I had a lot of overthinking. And I know that that overthinking triggered me to dissociate from my body. And I know that getting back into my body was probably one of the most important things I've ever done in my life, energetically.
Right.
People are like, what do you mean getting back into your body? I mean, getting back into my body, energetic body. Okay. And then if you're able to stay grounded in your energetic body consistently, I honestly believe 100% that no matter how severe your mental challenges in your brain are, that they can be reversed. I honestly believe that your energetic, it's all energy. So why wouldn't it? And the body and the brain know how to heal itself. So why wouldn't the body and the brain be able to heal itself? That's the way we're made. And as you're saying, you have questions like with the dissociative identity disorder patient, it's a work in progress, because obviously the more work you do, the more work that patient does, that client does, the better off they're going to be around that homeostatic, that balanced state in their brain. Right. But I feel like if we were to do like a clinical research study and we had any of these challenges that people face and we did the work consistently over a year, we would see a high percentage of them certainly reduce the amount of pharmaceuticals they needed, and maybe would even be off of them.
Right. Well, we are finding, you and I, when we work with people, that we've been really helpful in helping people move away from benzos and, SSRIs, that people are able to, still titrating it, but still able to get off those things altogether, which is pretty amazing, because they're such hard things to get off of. So knowing that that's possible makes me wonder how much else is possible with the brain without requiring, something else, without requiring a chemical thing.
Well, I think we have to also think about how sick that stuff actually, that toxicity of that stuff is for the brain, and that's
Right.
more your expertise. Like, but I mean, that's poison.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
your
and it
body doesn't
shows up in the body as a toxin. Like I'm
body
always,
doesn't like that stuff,
yeah, yeah,
and you may need it for your brain health, for your balance to keep you functioning. But part of what I mean, like when I work on patients that was, I guess, like a similar thing would be like people getting the chemo out of their body.
right,
Like even if you have to have that for the time being while you're doing the energy work, probably a lot of the energy work would just be cleaning up the toxic mess in your body that it's created on, kind of keeping your body healthy
right,
along
right.
the way. I didn't even think about that until just now, but that's a huge benefit of the work to a person on that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I notice when I work with someone who is taking one kind of medication or the other, that part of the work ends up being detoxing them. Like I had a client who was taking a medication for her electrolytes, but it was a corticosteroid that had some electrolyte thing in it, which I had never heard of what it was. But when I was working with her body, I was like, oh, your electrolytes are imbalanced. Then you have a deficiency of electrolytes and you're not being able to hydrate properly. Your body is not getting the hydration it needs. And as I would go back and find the reasons why her body was doing that, which was taking us all the way back to her being 3 years old and something that happened when she was 3. And I said to her, your body doesn't like this corticosteroid. And she was like, yeah, but I'm scared not to take it because my electrolytes get off so much that I'm, I guess become really lightheaded or fainting or whatever, or I get dehydrated. And I was like, well, when we end up clearing everything, you might find that you don't need it anymore.
Yeah. So let's go back to, have you, or your thoughts around, so someone that may have bipolar symptoms, mania, and some depression and things like that. When you clear them, you ask the question: did this happen at this age? Did this happen at that age? Did this happen? Does that feel like to you an opening to sort of the source of where that came in energetically, like the trapped emotions or do you not get like one clear age stage where that happened? Can you
I,
find the seeding of it?
so I notice there are three different things that happen. One, I get a perception as an intuitive, as a medical intuitive, that somebody will say to me, oh, I have this electrolyte imbalance, and I'll immediately see something happening that caused great sadness, grief, fear, whatever, around the age of 3. I'll see that happening. But when I'm doing the work of releasing those trapped emotions, I might not get to that till quite far down in the process. And my own preference is that my client not go deeply into re-triggering or waking up those emotional states, but purely that they acknowledge them on an intellectual level, like, oh, yeah, I recognize that. I felt like that when I was 3. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they don't even know. They're like, I don't know, if you say that happened when, I was 3, that's cool, but I don't really have any recollection of it. That doesn't even matter, actually, I find, when I'm working. Like, the person doesn't have to know about it, doesn't have to remember it, doesn't have to have a memory or re-trigger that emotion in order for me to release it. So I find that kind of interesting.
So you don't really know what particular things you're releasing were triggering, to what degree they were. You just know that they're trapped and they need to be released.
Yeah, I might get a picture in my head, an image in my head. But if I say to my client, oh, you had a deep grief when you were 3, and the client's like, oh, yeah, maybe. And they don't remember, it doesn't mean anything to them. That doesn't really matter. Like
Yeah.
I might get a picture of why they had that deep grief, but if the client doesn't remember it, I don't try and reawaken it or re-trigger it or try and remind them of it
Hmm.
unless they want to, because I find that re-triggering that or reminding the person of that doesn't necessarily allow them to release it faster, and I don't feel like it necessarily benefits them.
Right. Right. And the same with me when I'm working with them, I don't want to go into the story about what that feeling in the stomach is about. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to go in, I don't want to get out of that connected body consciousness and go back into the head and get into some narrative about
Right.
that's the year my father left the family or whatever. That's
Right.
not,
Right.
because there's a story about that they have that may be very important to them, and that don't want to invalidate that in any way. But that story is part of the trapped emotion that they're trapped in. The
Right.
story is associated with the trapped emotion in the first place. So
And
what?
this is a
Yeah,
story, right? That's
it's
a
a
story.
story.
That's a
It's
story
not
that we make about something that happened
right,
to us.
because we had to make a story. We had to have it make sense to us at the time, and that story may be with them the rest of their life. No, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but the energy attached to the story they don't need anymore.
Right.
That's not serving them.
Right. So you want to be able, my goal is for the person to be able to think back, not to erase the events that happened in their lives, but for them to be able to think back on those events and not feel reactive about them. So not that they might think about like, oh, when my mother yelled at me and I was 3, I might have felt scared in that moment. I might have felt this, whatever I might have felt, but you don't have to refeel it. You have an awareness. You're able to be that witness, let's say,
Yeah.
that they talk about in Buddhist thought or in meditative work or whatever. They talk about being that witness so that you're able to be a witness who perceives what's happening, but doesn't have to necessarily, again, as they say in Buddhist thought, it doesn't create a flutter in your heart. You just have an awareness of it.
Yes, that's like what happens in the meditation work guide. A lot of times it'll be like people are in a bubble. It's like they're in a story bubble. And then I'll point out, I'm like, yeah, I see that. That's where you're dissociated. That's where you're trapped. But can you also feel there's a you outside the bubble? And they'll be like, oh, I didn't know that was me. But yeah, there's an awareness of a self that isn't the bubble. And then once that self that's already actualized, that's already free of the trapped emotion, once they're able to acknowledge and own that, then the bubble just kind of bursts and they're no longer separate from themselves. They're not in that, because what that trapped emotion does, it creates a separate identity, like an identity pocket, an identity bubble. And they're just going round and round and round in that bubble, but they're not letting life in. New life's not really getting in. That would heal that.
Right. Because the emotion creates that separation.
Yeah. Seals one off from, again, those brain chemicals that would be healing. So it's like that bubble is kind of like a toxic bubble, actually.
Right.
But it's familiar, it's safe because it's known. The ego likes it because it lives for status quo, to protect status quo. And those ego structures have to, part of the release of the trapped emotion is the ego structures that keep them in place. That's part of what we're doing, is we're in, the ego is realizing, oh, I don't have to be responsible for the burden that I'm carrying here, because the ego just like, give me another 10-pound rock to put on my shoulders and march up the hill. I'm good. No, I can do more of that. Like it doesn't realize it doesn't need to do any of that. It wasn't even made to do that, to be separate,
Yeah. And I think that's why, after someone does a session with me, and I think you find the same thing, is that they're always like, oh, I feel like I need to take a nap. I'm so sleepy. And I'm like, that's because it's so much work holding all that stuff together, holding that on your shoulders, perhaps, or holding that on your back, or just your whole energy body,
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep those things in place. so that when we start pulling the things out, the person relaxes so much that they can go and take a nap.
Yeah, I've noticed like that ego identity structure pattern that is keeping those blocks in place. What one as they're getting released will often feel like a lot of heat releasing in the body. And it's like, oh my God, the energy that it took to keep that in place when that can release, it's like it's literally like the body is it's like a fever. It's like an energy fever almost. Not like a temperature thing where you have a fever, but it's almost like the energy is it's like a volcano releasing of energy and it brings heat. I guess it is a temperature thing. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
so the person feels hot after a
yeah.
session with you usually?
Yeah, in the session itself, I'll be like, "Do you notice that heat in your body? Do you feel how things feel hot?" And they'll be like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, that's the release. That's that energy that you've used to keep things pushed down. Now that you're not doing that anymore and you're letting that trapped emotion come out, it well, for whatever reason, it registers into the body as a release of heat. So
That's
sometimes
right. And how long does that take till that dissipates?
it could be there for 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
In the session. Yeah, it could be a while. I mean, and then sometimes after that, I've noticed like, okay, you stick out your tongue and your tongue is red instead of pink. They'll say, pink is a healthy tongue. What's the red? The red is heat.
Right.
So part that it shows up that you just you're running hot. I mean, in acupuncture, that's what they talk about, right? Like heat is one of the
The Shen disturbance. So they call
yeah
that
a
Shen.
disturbance in your body.
Yeah. And the Shen disturbance I mean, they call it a heart disturbance, but it really means an emotional disturbance or in the emotional heart.
So and there's a gut there. We're talking about the brain is the topic of this, but there's a brain in your gut and there's a brain in your head, right? So they're communicating back and forth. So that heat, releasing that heat in your body is oftentimes people will say, "Wow, I feel like this pressure is releasing in my head. Like my head's been like it could be a headache or it just be like a pressure." It's
Right.
like that letting go of that trapped emotion where that heat's arising, that also then releases some pressure in the head again, where that thought pattern, those belief patterns have like kept you in lockdown in your brain. So in your mind, freed of those repressive patterns is like it is like burning it off.
Right. So I wonder, I mean, my feeling is by using the energy work, whether somebody's working with you and me or other kinds of energy workers or acupuncturists or craniosacral therapists, all people who work with the energy of the body, that there is a way in which one might actually heal these imbalances of the brain that right now Western medicine sees as things that necessarily require medical treatment.
My belief is 100% that it's possible to do that. Like my proof to my, who cares what I think? What have I experienced? What's the data? So my best success around that with a patient would be a chronic regional pain syndrome patient who there is no Western medical cure for that illness. So she would go to like UCLA and the doctors would just throw the kitchen sink at her, including antidepressants, anti-anxiety, Boost Bar, whatever it may be, Remeron for sleep. Just every month it's like, okay, well, let's try this. Let's try. Not every month. It takes a month or two of a medicine trial to see if it's effective or not. But inevitably, every time we would do a session, and she was on the latest and greatest that they said, well, let's try this. She realized like I don't need that. Like, I
Right.
don't want that. My body doesn't want, like, she would get in touch with the fact that her body and brain did not want that medicine.
Right.
So I feel like the more you're your own best knowledge source of what is going to work for you, your brain, your body better than anybody else. And what we're here to do is to give you permission on an energetic level to read your body.
Or
You're going to
trust.
learn, to trust your body and read and listen to your body. You're going to know. I mean, we don't tell people to get off benzos. They do the work with us, and then they're like, I'm titrating down today. I feel like I've made a lot of progress this week. What do you think? I'm like, well, let's do the work. Let's see. And then at the end of the session, they're like, okay, I'm going to titrate down another level. I mean, we could collaborate on what we see, you and I, with them. We're not just going to leave them alone having to make a decision, but if you do the work with us, you're going to become very knowledgeable, and you're going to trust your body and your brain to know what you need and it's week to week. You don't just make a decision, oh, today I'm just going to stop taking this. No, you're going to titrate down. You're going to do it in a methodical way.